How do we deal with a spouse who is sarcastic, nasty to the children? How do we deal with a spouse who makes unilateral major financial decisions? Spouses, meaning like husbands, have always made unilateral financial decisions because they were the only ones making any money. So they got to do whatever they wanted with that money, which was natural, but not always a good idea. So it's like an inherited behavior, which I think it's time to change. Because in today's world, a husband has to include his wife in the decisions because it's a much bigger factor today than it used to be. In the olden days, making a financial decision meant buying 2 potatoes or 4 potatoes. Okay? Let him make the decision. Today, it's like you're either in a house or you're out of the house. That doesn't just affect him. So if he makes a decision and you can lose your house or your mortgage, that's not a private decision anymore. But what do you do with a spouse who you disagree with on any subject? Whether he's making different decisions by himself or whether he's on a different page concerning intimacy. How do you handle a difference of opinion? So the first thing is you remind yourself that what's important is him. Don't lose sight of that. And for him, it's worth giving up everything, if you have to. Once you have that in place, then you can figure out whether you have to or not, whether you have to make sacrifice or you can work things out. But if you forget who you're dealing with and why you're dealing with him, if you forget that the marriage is a marriage and you start getting really hung up on issues, that's not going to do anybody any good. So it's always a question of priority. Can there be intimacy out of the bedroom? Is there an opportunity to be intimate without sex? Intimacy never involves sex. That's the whole point we're trying to make here. But what you mean is there an intimacy that is not physical? Is there emotional intimacy? Is there even mental intimacy? And the answer is yes. If the focus is him, that's intimacy. The miracle is that even a physical interaction can be intimate. You would think that the body can't be intimate. The body is selfish, and when the body is having pleasure, it's just my pleasure, and I'm sorry I can't be bothered with you. The miracle is that if you're really intimate, then even the physical can be intimate. It doesn't have to be selfish. That's pretty impressive. And that's why the Torah says you should become one flesh. To become one soul, that's easy. To become one heart is easier. But one flesh? Come on, when I'm hungry, it doesn't make my wife hungry. How do 2 bodies become one? So the ultimate miracle of intimacy is in the bedroom. But intimacy between husband and wife, that's their whole relationship. It's just about us. Even when you're doing things, they're just things. They're not the marriage. The marriage is just us. So there used to be the song about, we don't need anything, we can do without anything, as long as we have each other, we're fine. except that they ruined it. They say, we don't need anything, we can do without anything, as long as we have each other to love, then we don't need. Oh, so now you have one thing that you do need, and that's love. Not good enough. If you have each other, then you don't need anything, including love. Because the person you love is much more important than the love. It's the who, not the what. What do you feel towards your husband? Well, whatever. He's my husband. Is this making sense, or still not, huh? How do you deal with a spouse who is sarcastic and nasty to the children? If you approach it properly, if you talk about it because he's your husband and not as a condition for remaining your husband, if it doesn't come across like, if you don't shape up, I don't know. If it becomes like a threat, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you're talking about it because he's your husband, and he's not any less your husband when he's being sarcastic to the kids, you just think there's a better way of talking to children. And there is. So, have a conversation about it. But if you get really defensive or threatening, or that doesn't belong in a marriage. What does one do when your husband wants you to dress up and do things something about the bedroom makes you feel a little uncomfortable? And make our husband satisfied if it takes us out of our comfort zone. Yes. If you can make your husband happy, then that's what you do. But that doesn't mean that you stop growing. Everybody starts off at a certain level of tznius and a certain level of intimacy, a certain level of closeness, a certain type, style. That's your beginning point. But when you're starting off a new experience, a new phase of life. You're certainly not at your best. Why do we assume that whatever you do for the first week of your marriage, that's how it's going to remain for the rest of your life? Why shouldn't there be growth and improvement in this area as there is in every other? So you're going to grow in maturity, you're going to become parents, you're going to become responsible, you're going to raise children, you're going to be a mother of teenagers, and hopefully survive. So in every other area you're growing and maturing, but you're still acting in the bedroom like you did the first week? Why? Why aren't you growing there? So here's the bottom line. What are you allowed to do in the bedroom? Whatever you want. But that's the earth on which a ladder stands and reaches into heaven. You start off on earth, but you climb the ladder. So the Shulchan Aruch says, anything husband and wife want to do is fine. But if you want to be edel, if you want to have good children, if you want to be, then you climb the ladder. So if the husband is not on the same page as you, it means you took a step up the ladder and he hasn't made that step yet. It's a process. It's a process. It's not a fixed, permanent, inflexible condition. Whatever you're doing in the bedroom now, that's where you're starting. How far do you want to climb the ladder? So if your husband is not on the same page, it's okay, but see if you can get him to climb the ladder with you.
So what about the children that are conceived at the beginning of a marriage? They're at a disadvantage to later on, aren't they? Are they?
Yes, that's why there's that old expression that marriage is wasted on young people. It takes so much maturity, people shouldn't get married until they're 60. Of course, that creates other problems, so we don't do that. But yes, I mean, I think back to, anytime my children say to me, do you remember when I was 12 and you said to me, and I think, oh no, what could I possibly have said back then? I didn't know anything. So I'm about to hear something really stupid. What did I know back then? And what gave me the right to even talk to my kids back then? But that's how God created the world.
It's possible to be 10 steps apart.
Yeah. That means you're not paying attention. Or you weren't paying attention, and now all of a sudden you realize we've grown 10 steps apart.
So how do you get the distance closer?
You remind yourself that it's really about him. And even your ruchnisdike growth should not be more important than him.
So you said, so encourage him or bring him up, but we're not supposed to be the mashpia. So how would you?
Right, I'm not saying be mashpia. Maybe find him a mashpia. Encourage him to get a mashpia. Well, what is that story? I'm sure you've heard it. A story about somebody was getting divorced, or they had to get divorced, and then they were told, you can take one, your favorite thing you can take with you. So she took her husband. If sometimes, like God forbid, you have to get divorced. Okay, so get divorced, but take him with you. In other words, I have to have you. Everything else is negotiable. And when you make him feel like that, he'll climb the ladder with you. If he gets the feeling that climbing the ladder is more important than him, then he'll probably refuse.